Welcome to our show. I'm Doug Johnson. Each month, we highlight someone who has a powerful message that each of us can use as a strategy for success. Our guest today is a truly remarkable person. Professionally, she is an award-winning journalist, award-winning playwright, author, speaker, and motivator. Personally, she is a mom, not mine, a wife, also not mine, and friend, yes, mine. Let me introduce you to Robin Sachs, whose job is to get out of your own way, both on the show and for the rest of your life. Robin, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Doug. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Robin, you have a strategy for success, and that is very simple. You are overthinking everything. Get clarity, get moving, and get results. Can you tell us about that?
Certainly. Where I think it all came from was I spent a number of years in television news. And while I enjoyed doing that, while I was doing it, it got to a point where I started looking at it very differently. It started rubbing me the wrong way from a values standpoint because I started to realize everyone had the same information. It's called AP Newswire. Everyone gets their information from the same place.
Right.
And if all of us have the same information who own news stations, what do you have to do to begin differentiating yourself? The key is grab a viewer before you do down the street. And if we all have the same information, you had to start storytelling. And really what I started seeing and not appreciating about the industry was there was so much ridiculous minutia, honestly, that was being thrown into things. And that all of that minutia was being brought in and cluttering reality. And things were so simple, and we were making it ridiculous. And not only that, but there were these tweaks to make everything very negative. And I'll give you some examples. If you listen to any meteorologist, they'll always tell you it's partly cloudy. They'll never say it's partly sunny. They'll always say there's a 20% chance of rain. But we don't think in terms of, well, that's an 80% chance of sun. The unemployment rate is 10%. Well, that means today we have 90% employment. I don't care what school system you're from in this country, that's an A. The mindset shift started to fascinate me. And because I was on air with the stations I was with, I was known in the areas, and I was asked to MC little events or do openings and things. And I started talking like that just to kind of keep my sanity.
And what happened?
Every time I would do that, literally, I'd have a couple dozen people come up to me and say, I never thought about it that way. And I just became fascinated in the human brain and how we perceive things one way, and we listen to what's being said, but we don't ever listen to what's not being said. And that is usually 100 times more useful to our lives, and we begin overthinking the things we don't need to overthink. Same thing, we ask ourselves in conversation. We ask ourselves things all the time like, what if? Oh, what if this doesn't work? What if I do that? What if it doesn't happen? But we never answer the question.
Okay.
And so what happens is we what if ourselves into chaos, and when somebody says, stop, answer the question. Well, if that doesn't happen, we do that. Okay, you just created all of this stress and chaos, when if you got rid of all the minutia and threw it off the table and just went, what's the thing we're concentrating on? Focus, get clarity, take some action on it, and you get a result every single time.
I like the idea that slows down the stress factor.
Absolutely, and it's funny because if you think about stress, which is probably the number one cause of anything detrimental in our society today, it's just our culture. If I said, how many people think they self-create half of their stress? And every hand in the room will go up.
Right.
70%, 80%. It is how it is. It's not, I would never say 100%, because we live in stressful times. Stressful things happen. That would be unrealistic. However, stress isn't really about what's happening to you. because we don't have a lot of control over that. Stress is all about how we're choosing to respond to what's happening to you.
So we do it to ourselves.
The beauty of that is who has control over that.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. Everyone's probably experienced this, or they've seen someone do this. You're driving down the highway and somebody cuts you off in traffic and you have to slam on your brakes. At that moment in time, there are only two ways you can possibly respond. There are no more. And
I can think of one.
And we have dozens of these moments every day. The first one that probably comes to most of our minds, because we've been there, done that for various reasons, you slam on your brakes, you start yelling and gesturing and whatever, and sometimes it becomes humorous because sometimes you get so worked up, you have to drive up next to the person just so you can stare at them. And then when they don't notice us, we get even more angry. And within a matter of moments, the way we chose to respond to something is absolutely creating that whole fight or flight mode going on in our bodies. And when we do that, we release all those stress chemicals, all those stress hormones. We're telling our brain, get that adrenaline pumping, get the cortisol pumping.
Right.
And once it's released, it's coursing through our bodies. And that's why if that happens at 8 o'clock in the morning, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're still in that mode. You've just created that.
So it's a choice.
It's a choice, because if we go back, the second response would have been slam on your brakes and glad I was paying attention and just move on with your day. But our default response is often that first one. And so it's really about that awareness of how I'm choosing to respond is causing that stress. And if you watch someone else do it, it's kind of humorous, because when it's happening to me, it's stressful. When it's happening to you, it's funny.
Right.
It's perspective.
Well, and you have written a book that really kind of addresses that and addresses the choices, called Get Off My Bus, How to Get Clarity, Get in the Driver's Seat, and Get Moving in Your Life. And by the way, for our audience, that was nominated for Small Business Trends Small Business Book of 2010. Can you tell us about the book?
Certainly. Get Off My Bus is really about, we have different moments in our lives where there are 5 questions that if we ask ourselves and answer them, we can get total clarity on whatever it is we're doing in that moment.
Okay.
And the analogy of get off my bus is really this. Each of us is born and we're a bus driver. And we have a bus that we drive through our lives. And as we drive through our lives, people are constantly coming onto the bus and getting off of the bus. Some people come on for moments and then leave. Some people come on for a lifetime and everything in between. And the idea is, at those moments in our lives where we're stressing or we're stuck and we're looking for some more clarity, which is the key again,
Right.
the 5 questions are these. Number 1, who's sitting in your bus's driver's seat? Is it you, or have you gotten up and let someone else sit down? And if so, who is that? Why did that happen? What's going on there? The second question is, if you look across the top of any city bus, what's there? Where's the bus going?
Destination. Right. Yeah.
What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? Because if you don't have some clarity on that, you're probably wandering aimlessly through the streets like a lot of people.
Well, yeah, and you can't get there if you don't know where you're going.
If you don't know where you're going, absolutely. How are you going to get there? Now, those 2 first questions are a little bit about yourself. The third question then is, once you get a sense of those 2 questions, turn around and look at your passengers. And the third question is, who needs to get off your bus? Who are the naysayers in your life? Who are the negative ones? Who are the ones that are constantly saying, it'll never work? And interestingly enough, as soon as you say that, names pop to our heads instantly.
They do.
We know who those people are. No judgments. We know who those people are. And if you're not sure, they're the people that the moment your phone rings and you pick it up and see the caller ID and you go, I don't have the energy right now. Those are the people. And we all have them. But who needs to get off your bus? And that doesn't mean, go throw mom off the bus or this person off the bus. It's sometimes we're focusing so much on them that we've got them sitting right behind us. And simply by releasing our focus from them, they naturally drift back a few seats.
Okay.
The fourth question is, who needs to get on your bus? Because once you get a lot of clarity around, what am I trying to do? Where am I headed? What am I trying to accomplish? What's the point? It's a lot easier to go, who are the people who always are saying, I don't know if it'll work, but give it a try. Getting clarity on what I'm trying to do instantly starts to tell you who needs to get on the bus. And the final question is, whose bus do you need to get off of? And what that's all about is, we all have tons of things that we do in our lives. We're very busy people, everybody. And there come times when we realize something we've been doing for a while that was a great fit back then isn't necessarily anymore. And that's not where our time and energy is being enjoyed or being best spent anymore. And to be able to not just be on autopilot and keep going to those things and doing those things, but to be able to, again, be aware and go, it's not a fit anymore. I can step away from that and take that time and energy and put it somewhere else.
Interesting. So kind of change gears as necessary.
Absolutely.
Robin, you talked a little bit earlier about your background and how some of this came about in your strategy for success. What qualifies you to write a book like this?
Well, I always got A's in English Lit.
Ah, that helps.
So that was the first thing. No, you know what? It's interesting because the more I realized that, and going back to the little talks that I would do, and people would come up and say, it resonated with me. And interestingly enough, people would say, yeah, I'd like to think more about that or work more with that. Can you recommend any books, any people, anything like that? And honestly, I got tired of selling everyone else's books. You know, it was, hey, go to Tony Robbins for this, or Stephen Covey for this, or go grab a Wayne Dyer, but whatever, the top dozen that come to mind. And I realized that these concepts aren't new. We've talked about them for thousands of years. Aristotle constantly was talking about it. Tony Robbins was talking about it, 6 months ago. We're talking about it right now.
Right.
It's the stuff that just bears repeating. And the concepts aren't new, but the way that it was being put in those words were resonating with people. And so I thought, this is something I need to share. I've experienced this stuff. This is how I work with things, and it works. And so why would you not want to share it? And I think the best part of the best reason for penning anything is I want to tell you something because it worked for me. I want to see if it has an impact for you. And if so, here it is.
That's really neat. Great idea. The book actually pulls no punches, and yet accomplishes what it does through humor, which leads me to the next question. You are very involved with improvisational theater. So what was that like, and how does that affect your life now?
Did a lot of theater growing up, was involved with improv on and off for several years. And interesting because the whole concept of improv is you go with the flow. And there is no script, and you go with the flow. And interestingly enough, what I equated that to very quickly was, that's life. Life is a big improv skit.
Okay.
There are things that you're expecting sometimes and they don't happen. And you in the moment have to come up with, how do I twist this? How do I make it work? And that was the thing about improv that I thought was neat, was you could get on stage and just take things wherever they went. And the concept of having to continue going with it, because you could never say no. If you said no on stage, a scene stopped.
Well, and something that I've heard you talk about, and from obviously your improvisational days, was yes-anding. Can you talk about yes-anding?
Absolutely. There are no rules, basically, of improv. Like I said, you go where it takes you. But there's one unwritten rule that can never be broken, and that's called the yes-and. And the idea being, like I said, you can never say no on stage because you instantly stop a skit. What you have to do is yes-and. If we're doing a skit, an improv skit, and you say something, I have to acknowledge what you just said and take it to another. I have to keep adding to it. Yes, there is an elephant walking through the door, Doug. And what a beautiful suit he has on. He must be on the next show. or hopefully something much more witty than that. That's why I'm not in improv anymore. But point is, I have to acknowledge what you just said, absolutely agree with it, and take it somewhere else. And we have to keep building. In our lives, we don't yes and. We yes but.
True.
And what happens is we find things that are exciting to us. We get worked up about something where, that's a great idea, Doug, yes, but I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the energy, I couldn't ever do that, I don't know. And we go into this spiral, and it's like water going down a drain. It starts slowly, and then it goes faster and faster and faster and faster, and we instantly talk ourselves out of things that really enlightened us for 12 seconds. And instead of finding the things that will get in the way with a yes but, I always encourage people to take that lesson from improv and yes and things first. Because what happens is, if we say, okay, if we did this, that would allow us to do this. And if we could do this, well, then we could go do that. And if this happened, then we could go talk to them about having that happen. Yes and it, and then come back, because it is important to know what's going to get in the way, what challenges might arise before they do, and now try and yes but it. Because then the purpose of the yes but becomes, I can see the possibilities. Wow.
Okay.
Now, what might get in the way of those? And it's so much easier when you do it backwards, when you flip it like that. I've seen the possibilities. Oh, well, if this happens, we just do this. If that happens, we shift gears. And it allows us so much more flexibility to just go, that's not a big deal. But if I went there first, it would be the thing that shut me down.
Well, and I think so often folks, when they yes but, other people, and including those folks, remember the but part, as opposed to when you yes and those possibilities, it kind of shuts down. So doing the yes and is so much more beneficial.
You know, going back to that whole concept, the mass media thing, why are things negatively bent? Because they catch our attention. It's part of our culture, it's part of our society. You know, that's why you can't walk into a McDonald's these days without, you know, CNN on a huge flat screen, and it's what's across the bottom all the time, breaking news.
Right.
I don't know if we don't have any facts, we don't have any information, we don't even know if there's a situation going on, but we're here for the next 7 hours.
Right.
That's become our lives in so many ways. And like you said, it's just the idea of pushing that thinking aside and going, let's look at the possibilities, turn off all of the what's going wrong. Right. And start focusing on what's going right. And, you know, nothing is guaranteed in life, but boy, don't you have quite a bit of a better possibility for a positive outcome with a positive message up here than a negative one? Absolutely, 100% of the time.
Cool tip. I love it. We are very impressed by your sense of humor. I'm very impressed by your sense of humor all the time. And you make...
You're an easy audience, Doug. It's all right. Hey, thank you for that.
You make a point that's easy and fun to understand. And we're going to go to a video clip and watch that and hear you talk about the oxygen in an airplane and also about taking a group photo. So we'll watch that and come back.
All right. Have you ever heard the analogy about taking your oxygen first? If you're in an airplane and the cabin pressure changes and the oxygen masks fall from the console, what do they tell you to do? Put your mask on first and then go help others. Now let's think about this. Why do they say that? A lot of us are in that mode of if somebody needs something, I want to go do for them. I want to help. Right? We're always doing for everyone else. And we're the ones, if there's time left later at the end of the day, I'll do something nice for me. And of course, we never get there, right? If you were on that airplane and the masks dropped and you went, oh, I can't take care of me, I better go help everybody else to make sure they're okay. What would happen, probably within a matter of a couple of minutes? You'd pass out. And now, not only are you of no help to the people you wanted to help, now you're a burden on them because they have to stop what they're doing and come take care of you. Now, if you take the few moments, and it literally takes moments sometimes, to reach up, take air, put my mask on, take my oxygen first. I get to know every single person on that plane all day long. We don't take our oxygen first. What we do is we do for everybody else, and then we say, if I have any oxygen left, which I never do, I'll take a breath. And that's completely backwards. And sometimes people think, well, that's selfish, that's self-centered, I'm not that kind of person. I want to do for others, and then I'll take care of it. I'm okay. Let me give you another analogy to throw in your toolbox today. Of the people in this room, let's say I took a group shot, and I went over and printed the picture out, and I started passing it around. I handed it to the first person. Out of 50, 60 people in the room, what would that first person immediately look at? Themselves. And what would they immediately think? What a horrible picture! Oh my goodness! My hair, the color, my outfit, They pass it to the second person. Out of all those people, even if the first person audibly gasped about themselves, what does the second person do? What do they look at? And what do they see? Horrible picture. Oh my goodness, I can't even pass this around. We're so self-centered sometimes that nobody else can even say that. If you passed it back to the first person, and they looked at the second person, what would they instantly say? What a nice picture. You talk about perspective, perception of things. Again, it's autopilot, I think, in our society, in our culture. We walk into a room and we're always thinking, what are they thinking of me? What is someone thinking? Am I okay? Do I look okay? What's going on? Why are they looking at me? They're looking at me. I wonder why. We're so in our heads. And here's the reality, okay? They barely know you're in the room. Do you know why? Because they're doing the same thing in their head. They don't care about what you're looking like. They're sitting there wondering, I wonder what everyone's thinking of me. When we go in here, it's a great place. By the way, I have a philosophy about pictures I want to share with you. Ready? If your eyes are open and you're smiling, it's what you look like. Get over it.
Robin, in the clip, you mentioned perception. How does perception play a role in our everyday thinking?
Perception is everything. It's, I'll go back again to the mass media concept, that idea of two things. One, if it's a 20% chance of rain, there's that 80% chance of sun.
Right.
Again, listening to not what's being said, but what's not being said. That is so much of our lives that we miss. And typically what's being said is taking us in a what's going wrong direction.
Right.
Instead of helping us, what I call flip the switch, and taking us into that, I can always see the possibilities because I'm choosing to look at that other side. Getting on the road again, that idea of I can choose to respond to something in a very hectic way, and I'm creating all of that stress. I can also choose to respond to it in a very benign way and go, no biggie, moving on.
Right, right.
If you've ever been looking for your keys or your phone or something, again, perspective. I'm stressing out because I got to leave in 5 minutes. I'm going to be late. I've got to be somewhere, and I'm looking. And someone else can walk into the room and say, what are you doing? I'm looking for my keys. I have to leave. And they literally look in front of you on the table and say, aren't those your keys? Oh, yeah, they are. And they laugh, and it's hilarious. And you're going, this isn't funny. We so don't see what's sitting right in front of us or what's sitting next to us because we're so busy looking out there for answers. And if you're looking for answers outside of yourself, good luck finding many. Because usually what we need is sitting right here with us.
Right.
And so that idea of just being able to sit back and go, I'm looking out there, I'm not finding. Take a breath and sit back and go, what's sitting right here? Because 90% of the time the answers are sitting right there.
Right.
90% of the time what we're looking for is in that what I'm not being told. And you can easily do that. Sit down, watch any newscast, and after every story, ask what the flip of what they just said was. And you'll find it all the time.
I think that is so interesting. One last thing that I'd like to touch on quickly. I've heard you say, do not focus on succeeding, focus on exceeding. Can you talk about that?
I almost want to say it almost speaks for itself. It's amazing to me. And that word success, I think, is it's such an important, powerful word, and it's such an empowering word. But I think people often perceive it in the wrong way. Because if you don't, they look at it black and white. If you don't succeed, what did you do? You failed. And there's not a lot of in between. And the idea of exceeding is, I have a goal. I see somewhere I'd like to be. But you know what? Once I see that, let me come back to where I am. And if I keep that in mind, I can go off on tangents. I can take those different side streets that are going to help me enhance what I'm doing. And I can always come back on the road and get to what I was trying to do. But oftentimes when you let yourself see the goal, come back to where you are and go, let me head in that direction. You allow yourself a lot more flexibility and freedom, and that allows you to exceed because you're not just shooting for one thing and it's not black or white. You don't fail. Like Thomas Edison said, I didn't, fail 10,000 times inventing the light bulb. I successfully found 10,000 ways how it wouldn't work.
Great. Robin, fascinating. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for the invite, Doug. My
You
pleasure.
bet. You bet. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever pointed the finger? Well, of course you have. We all have. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you do, you ought to, you need to, you should, that's the finger point. What happens with the other person that you're saying that to? Well, typically what happens is the eyes glaze over, they get defensive, and the wall goes up, right? So try something. This is a little tip, makes people less defensive, and it's easy to do. And I call it flipping the finger, point that is. So how do you do that? Focus on the issue as opposed to the person. So for example, rather than saying, you didn't vacuum the floor, say simply, the floor wasn't vacuumed. What happens? That takes the defensiveness away from the person and really focuses on what should be focused on, the issue. So give it a try. Rather than pointing the finger, flip the finger. Point, that is.